Hello and welcome to Cupertino Insight. My name is Dorothy Cornelius. I'm the City Clerk for the City of Cupertino and your host for this program. Our first guest this evening is Phil Johnson, the current Vice Mayor of Cupertino. Welcome to Cupertino Insight, Phil.
Thank you, Dorothy.
It's very nice to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. To start right off, what are the major problems you see facing Cupertino at this time?
Well, the major problems, and I think most of the community is aware of what they are, but in my mind, the first and largest problem that we're faced with is traffic. Traffic has been a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem throughout the 80s. Many people don't see Cupertino growing tremendously in the near future. But surprisingly enough, there is still quite a bit of land that's in the city that will be developed over the next couple of years. And on top of that, we have to remember that we're surrounded by many other cities, and this is the fastest growing county in the country. And so we're going to be deeply impacted. Even if we do not significantly grow, we will be faced with the problem of traffic. So that's number one. Number two is solid waste. That's something that's before us. It's something that the council will be talking about during the next several meetings, I'm sure. We created a committee to look into the problem. And it's a very emotional issue, and it's a very serious issue. And the third issue that we've also created a committee on would be the issue of rental housing. Throughout the 70s, rental housing was in a decline, while the single-family homes had a boom period due to low interest rates. During the 80s, single-family homes declined, so did the rental housing supply decline. Therefore, you've got a very serious situation today. Meanwhile, the rents are escalating. And we've got a committee looking into the problems of what do we do about the housing supply and the rental supply, and more importantly, or at least the one issue that I'm really interested in, is how can we solve disputes between landlords and tenants? And what mitigating factors, what ideas can we implement to help solve the problems that are very important to the people that are living in our rental supply?
What do you feel are your goals for Cupertino in the future?
Well, the one goal that means the most to me is to, and this is nothing that one person can achieve. It's specifically Highway 85. We need Highway 85 in the city. The county needs it. It's something that the council has been working on for years. It's something that impacts and will help improve the quality of life in this city. So by far, Highway 85 is a very important goal that we have to continue to work on. I think it should be one of the major campaign issues for the people that will be running for the State Senate and for the Assembly in this upcoming race in June. It's something that's going to take time, and it's something that everybody in the community, not just the elected officials, need to be concerned about. The second issue is something that Mayor Plengy has talked about, and also people at all levels of government, and that is increased communication. These are frustrating times for many people. We're experiencing fast growth. This is a technological melting pot in the country and in the world. There's a lot of change happening, and it's very important to open the communication and to do all we can to get more input from the people that are living in the community. It needs to happen in the city, it needs to happen at the county levels, and at the state levels.
Well, I really feel that your council, our council, has been extremely good about public input and appointing these citizens committees in order to facilitate communication between the local government and the people they represent.
Well, the quality of the citizens that we've had serving on the committees, and these people put in tremendous hours, a lot of time into this process. And the quality, I think everybody will agree, is fantastic, perhaps the highest in the valley.
I really do agree with you there. And speaking of time putting in, I know council, although council members are only part-time, they put in a tremendous amount of work. Ask council members. My office sends you those horrible packets every other Friday night that you must spend your weekends reading. And facing that kind of commitment and the various issues that are before you, what prompted you to run for city council?
Well, interestingly enough, I've always been fascinated by the political process, and as long as I can remember. And through school, my bachelor's degree is in political science, and for many years I've worked on political campaigns. And having moved to Cupertino, I love the city, and I think it's a great place to live. And I think it was, I wanted to get involved as much as I could, and I initially began on the Architectural Site Approval Committee and served several years on that committee. And then moved up to the Planning Commission and served 6 or 7 months on that body. And then I decided that I wanted and felt that I could make a contribution to the City Council.
Well, you certainly seem to be. And I'm looking forward to your being mayor. Towards the end of this year, I believe you will most likely be the person selected to be mayor.
That could be a possibility.
It is a possibility, right. Well, we'll find out soon. I want to thank you very much for being here today, Phil. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I'll see you again a little while at the council meeting.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you. As Phil mentioned, in response to a variety of landlord-tenant problems in Cupertino, the City Council has appointed a 15-member advisory body to study a variety of issues, including conflict resolution, an assessment of current housing, ways of increasing rental housing, and the role of local government. They will also be looking into the problems of special segments of the population, such as handicapped, senior citizens on fixed incomes, family housing, including families with single heads of household. Right now, I'd like to show you a tape of that committee in action.
This committee was started as a response to the increases in rents that the people at the Lake Biltmore apartment complex and the also the Glenbrook people were having a difference of opinion there, and many. I think it's not just the two complexes, but the whole city, and as we know from the newspaper and the news media in general, the whole Bay Area is having a problem. It's not even a local issue to the Bay Area. The city, the state, and it's nationwide, really.
I think that there is a feeling in the council that the citizens of Cupertino now are really becoming aware of the problem. Up to now, it's been, if you wanted to live in Cupertino, well, the rents are a little high. But when they're going up and up, the city provided us with a survey of the rents. And when you see things between May '82 and September '83, where things go from, let's say, 725 to 825, that's a sizable thing. From May '82 to November '83, from say 925 to 1,236. And then with Lake Biltmore, which was a special case, of course, rents doubled. And that's something very difficult to adapt to. The vacancy factor in Cupertino, as far as we can tell, is under 1%, and 5% is considered sort of normal. So that means if you don't like where you're living, there's just no place else to go. I mean, unless you want to go Gilroy, which is usually what we hear, if they don't like it in Cupertino. But what can you do? I mean, if you work, it's a huge problem in that industry is beginning to see that if you can't house your people, particularly your lower paid people, they're going to move someplace where they can house them, or they're going to close down here. I mean, what else can they do? And then you have the people who work in Cupertino and have to live in, say, Gilroy. Then you've added your traffic problem and your pollution problem. So it's one great big circle. And it seems to me that housing is the place to tackle it. It doesn't do any good to build 4 more lanes on all your freeways, because they always fill up immediately. So if you want to keep industry here and keep it happy, then I think everybody has to contribute something toward the problem of housing people, and whether it's planning, whether it's money, something has to happen so that people can live someplace near where they work.
I think the reason there hasn't been any more development of rental housing is fairly straightforward. Both the cost of land and the cost of building apartment units has far outstripped the rate at which rentals have gone up over the last 5 or 6 years in the valley, and therefore It just hasn't made sense from a numbers point of view by way of return of investment for either the investors or for the developers to build apartments in Cupertino or really in the Santa Clara Valley over the last 5 years, I'd say. I think I'm hopeful that we'll, after having a thorough discussion on a number of very relevant topics, focus on the ways in which we can increase the rental stock in Cupertino. And there's really two ways to do that. Through better use of the existing rental units and residential units. Some examples would be better use of second units, room rentals, project match, some of these kinds of things that we're starting to discuss. And the second way is to increase the rental supply. And I mentioned some of those before. I think there are some ways that certain parcels of land in the community might be used for rental housing. We haven't discussed it yet. The idea of school sites is one, knowing that the city does not own these sites. There are obvious complications, but I think there are possibilities there. The city may control certain parcels in town that could be used. We hope to get into that in the committee. Well, I think the fact that there are all types of varied interests included in the committee is very favorable. You're going to hear all the different viewpoints, and they're going to be put on the table. I think no one seems to be shy to state their opinions. I think if we didn't have that, we might leave something out. So that I think you'll get it all on the table. It does make the process a little, I think it'll take a little longer. But I do think we will be able to address the key issues because we're hearing it from both sides. And I think it's, a key point is that it's not, it doesn't have to be a confrontational thing. There is a problem. Affordability of housing is the problem, and we don't have to be on opposite sides of the table. And I hope we can come to some conclusions that will help resolve the problem in Cupertino.
The committee is meeting once a week. Currently, they're putting together their work plan, which they hope to present to Council sometime in February. They expect to have their report completed by the end of May. The committee meets at 7:30 p.m. in the conference room in City Hall on alternate Tuesdays and Thursdays. The public is invited to attend, and your input is encouraged. Today in the studio, visiting us is Barbara Brown, the assistant to the city manager here in Cupertino. Barbara is here to discuss the city's emergency plan. Hello, Barbara, and welcome to Cupertino Insight.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
First of all, what is an emergency plan and what's its purpose?
The emergency plan in the city of Cupertino is a written document that establishes an organization to respond to disasters, whether they be man-made disasters, natural disasters, or disasters caused by hostilities with other countries. It assigns tasks, and it sets out some very general policies and procedures to be used in the event of an emergency. What it's not probably is important too, and that is it's not a specific work plan that says when we have an earthquake we do 1, 2, 3, 4. Because emergencies of whatever nature tend to be fluid and you don't know what facilities or resources might be affected or might be available, it tends to be in a general kind of response and for us to then use our best judgment at the event that they decide what we need to do, depending on what the emergency is.
What type of emergencies would activate the plan?
We have all kinds of emergencies if you stop and think about it, and some of them are on a very small scale, and some we haven't experienced in our lifetime, but we seem to keep getting ready for, like an earthquake. An emergency can be a chemical spill that requires that we isolate a neighborhood. or a section of the city. It can be a flood or an earthquake, which has regional proportions outside of the city limits itself. Or it can be a multiple car accident with lots of injuries and streets having to be blocked off and not accessible to other people. All of those activate the emergency plan at one level or another. We may not need to have a lot of aspects of the plan implemented if in fact it's a small isolated area that we're able to cordon off. On the other hand, if it's a full-scale emergency response to an earthquake, we'll probably use all of it. The decision to activate the plan is the responsibility of the city manager, who, for the purposes of the plan, is the disaster director.
I see. Now, I know Cupertino is just a small portion of a very large area, and certainly we are interconnected with other areas. And since we don't have our own police and fire department in particular, would I be correct in assuming that we coordinate this plan with other agencies?
Yeah, we'd have to, even if we had police and fire under our own jurisdiction, because most disasters have impacts in neighboring communities, even if it's just a matter of closing down a street, certainly a major thoroughfare in this area. But we also coordinate not only with the Sheriff's Department, which provides us with law enforcement services in Central Fire District, but we work actively with the school districts, which we would use for health and shelter purposes if we needed to have mass care facilities. We work closely with the Red Cross also in the event that we would need to have housing for people in the event of an emergency. We work with Public Health Department at the county level and a number of other neighboring cities that have been real helpful in terms of providing us with resources that we may or may not be able to get to in our own community, like large heavy equipment or enough medical supplies. For example, this city doesn't have a hospital in its city limits. We have an emergency medical clinic that we use, and we think they're wonderful, but if the event that there were a lot of mass casualties, we'd have to then coordinate with either El Camino Hospital or Kaiser Hospital. So there's a myriad number of agencies and governmental jurisdictions that we try to work with and coordinate.
In case of an emergency, how would the general public hear about it and hear what they should be doing?
Well, there's the emergency broadcasting system. You probably drive along in your car every now and then and hear them say, "This is a test, it's only a test," and then you hear this buzzing sound. That's a test of the emergency broadcasting system. It works on the radio, and all radios feed into it. There's a number of designated stations in this county that would provide regional information. On the other hand, if it was a neighborhood we were evacuating because of a chemical spill or a fire that was not contained at that time, we use the Sheriff's Department as the major link in our communications. They simply knock on doors to get people out quickly who can't depend on everybody listening to the radio at the time. In addition to that, depending on the length of the emergency and the time, we do have a public information officer, and the press and the media have been working with the county as well as the state in doing the kinds of things they do best, getting information out to the public. And one of the major jobs of government, and that's to provide good, adequate information and instructions to the citizens.
Okay, because I'm at City Hall too, I happen to know that the city does hold kind of a dry run for emergencies, I believe annually.
We do it twice a year now.
Twice a year now, okay. Yeah. What are some of the kinds of things that you do for that?
Well, the exercises that we have two forms of exercise. One is a general coordination, sharing of information around a specific type of disaster. Let's say, for example, we were going to have a chemical spill and it had some impact on the sewer and storm drain lines, and we needed some areas evacuated because of that. So we set up a scenario that looks something like that, and then with the scenario, with the agencies that we coordinate, that long list of people I was naming earlier, we come together and share the information, our responsibility, and what we can expect from one another. The second exercise that we have annually tends to be also set with a scenario of a disaster. Let's say it's an earthquake, and it tells us which water lines are down, where the electricity is at, what damaged property there may be, and what casualties there would be, if any, and sets that kind of scenario. And then we try in sort of a mock response to that scenario to actually act out what it is that we would do under the circumstances. The exercise is always a success when we find that there are areas that we need to learn some more about, or resources that we weren't sure about, or there's more for us to do. And that's why we have the exercises, so that we don't get complacent and think we've got it wired and then not have it there.
But it sounds like the city and other agencies are working on being prepared in case an emergency does arise. But what can the average citizen do to be prepared for an emergency?
One of the things I think is really important for the average citizen to realize is that in the event of a major disaster, flooding, earthquake, or whatever, it's possible that they may be isolated from any kind of outside assistance for a while. So they need to be prepared to take care of themselves for a period of time. That means having water and food. That means knowing how to turn off the utilities. That means understanding that, except in the case of an emergency, that they don't need to use their telephones or take any unnecessary trips.
Well, thank you very much for being here today, Barbara. It's always nice to see you.
Well, thank you.
And I think you probably gave some of the viewers some very helpful hints about what to do in case of an emergency.
Okay.
In 1975, the city of Cupertino introduced what has turned out to be a very successful program. This is our Naturalist program. Now I'd like you to view a tape introducing our naturalist and showing some of the things that she makes available to the residents of Cupertino.
My name is Kim Saxton Heinrichs, and I'm the naturalist for Cupertino Parks and Recreation Department. We're very lucky to have a nature program in the Parks and Recreation Department because there aren't very many departments that have this kind of a program. And what we have is a junior nature museum with lots of animals, a snake, a gopher snake, a possum, a rabbit, tarantula, lizards, turtles, different animals that I can teach children about. And we have teachers come out here during the weekdays, during the school days, and bring their groups out, and I talk about the different kinds of animals that live in our environment, and I try to teach the children what animals live here and how they can relate to the animals and how they're a part of their environment along with the animals. We offer after-school science classes, and in those classes I teach various topics. I decide which kinds of things I want to cover. And for instance, the ones coming up are called something about whales, vanishing animals, endangered species, different things. Another one is I do like spiders and snakes. A lot of children are a little bit afraid of spiders and snakes, and so that one covers that topic. And those are a minimum of 8 children in the group and a maximum of 12. And so they're just small classes, and they meet twice, and I just talk about those different things in those classes. In the summertime we have nature camp going on, and that's a 2-week program, and they either meet in the morning or in the afternoon depending on the age group. And we have a group of about 24 children and 4 leaders, and the emphasis is on the nature aspect of camp, doing nature crafts, nature classes, nature oriented anything. Games, activities, and they're all pretty much located in this area at this site. We also go on local field trips to maybe De Anza College, where we have the Environmental Study Center over there, the planetarium. We may take a field trip over to Villa Montalvo or this local area, Rancho San Antonio, and just visit the different environments in our local area. One of my first little friends over here is called Fang, and we don't try to scare the children with the name. Actually, Fang doesn't have any fangs at all, and that's the reason we call him Fang. Fang's a gopher snake that was found out here in the park by one of my students, one of my classes, and Fang's a real gentle snake. He's just been with us for about 6 months, and basically when I have the children in the classroom, show them how he's not going to hurt me and how he's the type of snake that is very useful out in our environment because he gets rid of rodents, quite a few gophers and mice and rats. So he's pretty important to have out in our local environment. A lot of people are deathly afraid of snakes, and I just try to show them that there's really some types of snakes there's nothing to be afraid of. Okay, the other animal that people have a problem with is a tarantula. And it's probably because of the movies that we've seen that show a spider attacking people or people covered by spiders and they're screaming and they die. You know? And it's the kind of thing that scares people, and it's not true. Tarantulas don't do that. And even if they did bite, their venom isn't any more powerful than a bee sting. So it wouldn't really kill you unless you're allergic to bee stings. This is Harriet. And Harriet's been in the museum for about a year now. She's a female, and I got her from a pet shop. And the reason that I got a female is because you find males in the area, but the males don't live as long. Usually when you find them, it's towards the end of their lifespan, and they're going to die. It's about 10 years have gone by, and they're going to die by December. Most of the time you find them in September. And the female lived 20 years, and so I wanted to get a female, and they're more difficult to find. She comes from Mexico, and she's a Mexican red-kneed. She has little red spots. The type that we have in our area wouldn't look like this. They're a little bit smaller and darker in color, maybe browner. But Harriet is pretty gentle. She crawls around, so when she gets frightened, she, instead of biting, like most people would think, she just kicks hair off the back of her abdomen. And you can see back here, she has a little bit of bald spot coming along here, and what she does is she just takes her back leg and kicks the hair off, and the hair might get into an animal's eyes, or if it's got thin skin it might make them itch a little bit, but it doesn't really irritate human skin, so it doesn't even bother us. And she has 8 eyes, and her eyes aren't very good. She can see day and night, and that's about it. And she has their 8 legs, so 1 for each eye. She eats crickets about once a week, maybe 3 or 4 of them. She also molts. Last summer she climbed right out of her skin during a session of nature camp, and the children were able to watch that. When she gets a little bit too large for her skin, she's like the snake they shed. This is Posy. And Posy came to us through wildlife rescue. She was orphaned as a baby in Oklahoma, and she was brought back to California because the people who accidentally ran over her mother knew about wildlife rescue, and so they brought her back. And the Department of Department of Fish and Game and Wildlife has decided that she's not releasable because she is from out of state. So she has to stay in captivity in California, or she could be released back in Oklahoma. So that's why we have her. Possums usually sleep during the daytime, so she's kind of tired right now. And actually possums are pretty wild animals, and I teach the children that we shouldn't pick them up if you see one along the street. They have very sharp teeth, and they can actually bite all the way through your finger. I know of somebody who was bitten by one. Posy's pretty tame because she has been held by people quite a bit, but they can be pretty vicious, so we need to be careful of them. But a lot of children don't see them. They haven't ever seen one of these before, so they're pretty interesting to look at. This is Buster, and Buster came to us through a gardener from the Cupertino Community Gardens who found her munching on her lettuce, and so she brought her over here, and she's been a resident ever since. That was sometime in 1972, I think. And Buster runs the museum. We let her pretty much roam around freely around the museum. She doesn't mess things up too much. She's pretty clean, and she's a pretty nice little bunny rabbit. She's one of the favorites of all the children in the museum. She's just a mix, I think. She has a little special thing underneath her chin that's called a dewlap, and what she does is when she has her babies, she pulls the hair from underneath her chin to line her nest. So that's one thing that's kind of special about her. We also teach the children about how she has very sensitive hearing and with her large ears, and eyes that can pretty much see all around her because she is a prey. She's the animal that's eaten by quite a few other animals. And so when we're teaching about the food chain, we teach how she is a major part of the food chain. She's at the bottom of the chain, so she's eaten by a lot of things. She just eats the grasses. And so she needs to be pretty aware of what her surroundings are. So she's a pretty sensitive kind of animal that is pretty fully aware of what's going on around her with good eyesight and good hearing. This is the trail guide, and if you come here and I'm not here, you can pick up your own trail guide to take a look at the park with the use of this. This tells a little bit of the background of the park, the historical background, and it gives the map and then the stops along the way with the different types of things to look for and the interesting things that are out in the trail. So you can pick up one of these on your way in. Okay, this is a junior nature pack, and you can borrow these from the Parks and Recreation Department. And inside it has, again, the trail guide. It also has a guide on how to use the pack and an inventory card that tells you what's in here. We have bug boxes, toothpicks, color cards, pennies, blindfolds, and sheets, white sheets. And with all these different things, you can go along the trail with children or with your dog, or no, actually you can't go with your dog because dogs aren't allowed, but with your family, and use these different things to see what's out in the trail a little bit more closely. So I'll be using these a little bit as we're going out there. Okay, this is the tree that fell down in a storm that a lot of the children think is dead, but it's actually alive. And I described to the kids how its roots have held on and how it's actually living. You can see the green leaves on it. This tree is kind of special because it's adapted to laying on its side, and in this case we can bring up the idea of adaptation, how the tree is, instead of growing tall now, it's growing sideways, and it's, instead of looking for the sun in that direction, the branches are going up this direction, so they're still looking for the sun to get their energy from, but now growing sideways instead. And we talk about how we adapt to the rain by putting on raincoats, and animals and trees also adapt to their environment. Okay, at this stop, the amphitheater, which was built by a Eagle Scout group, I have the children sit and just listen for a few minutes to the different sounds in nature. They listen for bees humming, or the water, or birds, or their own breathing. So I have them listen for different things that they may not get a chance to hear. And then we also listen for the human sounds, the man-made sounds that you might hear the freeway off in the distance, and a contrast between the two different types of sounds, so they can understand that there is some beauty out here in just listening and being really quiet. The next thing that I have them do is look for different colors that they may find out here. A lot of times they think that the only two colors out here are green and brown. So I give them these color cards without telling them what they have to do with them, and then they have to find something that matches this exactly. And so they're out here looking, and they find that the stems on the thistle is almost this color, or they find that the end of the leaf as it's fallen off in the fall is this color. And so it's kind of the unusual that they're looking for. They'll find that rocks have blue in them, and that there's a lot of colors, all the colors of the rainbow out here. I would like to encourage people to come down here. It's a unique place in the middle of a city. There's lots of classes going on out here that are really interesting, and lots of children have lots of fun, and adults too. They really enjoy coming into the outdoors. I hope that they come down and visit us.
I don't know, but somehow I don't think even Kim could get me to pick up Harriet the tarantula. However, for groups who are interested in taking a hike down the nature trail and visiting the museum, as well as those live exhibits, call 253-2060, our Parks and Recreation Department, and they'll be happy to set up a time for you. For those who just want to hike the nature trail, feel free to drop by. It's a self-guided hike. In this day and age, most of us are fairly conscious of trying to save energy. However, in our area, we have a school, DeVargas School, which has been nationally recognized for their energy conservation techniques. Recently, we took our camera to that school and followed that energy patrol around. Now I'd like you to see the tape of those young people in action.
Well, the Energy Patrol is a patrol is made up of students, and it started at DeVargas approximately 3 years ago. And the patrol at that time was just really an experiment with us in attempt to give children a practical experience in energy conservation. Something that would be visible, something they could see, something that was significant, and to them, they could see that they made a difference in terms of the energy output here at DeVargas. We are recognizing $1,000 a month in savings at this school through the students' effort, and that's significant.
Basically what we do with the students is kind of go against one of our tried and true rules, which is nobody goes into the classroom unless there's a teacher there to supervise. And what we do with this group of students is give them keys to the classroom so that they can get in at recess and lunchtime to check and make sure that all the lights are turned off. And it doesn't seem particularly significant, those few minutes at recess and lunch, but as we found, it does make a difference when that many lights are turned off for those periods of time. So of course we need a responsible group of students, the sorts of students that you could hand a key to and say, go into the classroom and make sure everything is okay. And so by teacher choice as well as student choice, these children have been chosen and screened a little bit, and they make a commitment to do that once a week at their own recess and lunchtime with teacher approval for these kids.
How many kids were involved in it?
Well, we have 20 on duty we change now every 6 or 8 weeks. At report card time, a new group comes on because so many wanted to be a part of that. So they each work 1 day a week for the 8-week period of time, and then we choose another group to come in and take over for them. So 20 at a time. Well, they come in, we wanted them to be visible and feel proud of what they were doing, and so we did get some jackets that say DeVargas Energy Patrol, and they have a lightning bolt symbol across the back to signify the electricity sort of approach. And they come and they get their jackets on, and their name tags, which are photo identification name tags that clip onto their jacket collar, which identifies them as a member of Energy Patrol. And there's nothing like a clipboard. You know, you're a very official person when you carry a clipboard around, so we have a little record sheet where they keep track of which lights are left on and which ones aren't. They get their clipboard, and then they take off and get their keys and go into classrooms and make a check and come back. And generally now they can do that in 7 to 10 minutes, and so they still have a little bit of their recess. And we wanted it to be a low-key approach in terms of not citations and that sort of thing. So they did develop a little, we're the DeVargas Lions. The lion is our mascot. So we did develop, the kids came up with a little piece of paper that they paste on or tape on classroom light switches that are left on that just says, oops, you forgot to turn out your lights, and that's a reminder. And as soon as they started that, the kids used to find almost every light in the building left on. And as soon as we started, oops, you forgot to turn out your lights, suddenly we hardly ever find a light on at DeVargas now. So they've almost made themselves obsolete, except there's always knowing that somebody's going to come and check. We all do a little better job when we know that's going to happen. So it's made a tremendous impact. And the awareness level in terms of energy conservation among the students is just increased. And parents say that that same thing is true at home as well, which is a nice carryover.
Yeah.
Well, we have a legislative award from the state of California, and we have received the communication from the president, from our senators.
And the Presidential Award for Conservation.
That's correct.
Which is nice.
State Department of Education recognizes, and we had our speaking team go to Sacramento, where we were invited up to present, what we do to the state superintendent. So, we have had those kinds of awards, and we've been recognized through the local newspapers also.
And this has given these students a chance to really see that they can themselves make an impact. They've done it all, and they've saved, $10,500 for the district by their own actions, and it's something that really has shown that everyone makes a difference when it comes to energy conservation.
It's really wonderful that such a seemingly small thing as checking to make sure the lights are turned out can result not just in an energy savings, but also a cost savings for the school district. But there's more than turning out lights for energy conservation. And the City of Cupertino does have an energy commission that's investigating ways to save energy. Currently, the commission does need one more member. Any person wishing to serve the community in that capacity could call my office, the city clerk's office, at City Hall, 252-4505, for more information about serving on that commission. And since we just left schools, I would like to announce that January 23rd through 27th is School Nurse Week. The school nurse serves a very important function to the school children, but not just to the children, but also to their parents. Not only their regular physical health needs, but also dental needs, and as a counselor. Tonight at the City Council meeting, there will be a public hearing to consider a street name change. Recently, Byrne Avenue was closed for traffic. So tonight the council will consider renaming it to Byrne Court. A very important item on tonight's agenda will be the presentation by the Solid Waste Advisory Committee to the council. They will be presenting their findings. They have studied not only the North Santa Clara County Solid Waste Management Authority's report, but has also listened to expert testimony regarding the potential use of Bryan Canyon as a solid waste landfill disposal site. The committee will inform the council that they feel Bryan Canyon should not be used as such a site. However, they are wholeheartedly endorsing the Solid Waste Management Authority's ideas regarding recycling. Another item on the agenda will be a presentation by the city's city attorney regarding a lawsuit recently filed against Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. This pertains to the county's expanding the use permit for the Stevens Creek Quarry and also issuing a negative declaration on the quarry. The issuance of a negative declaration means that the Board of Supervisors feels that the use of the quarry provides no significant impact on the environment of the area. The city is contesting that finding and feels that there should be an environmental impact report filed. They also say that since the quarry is a legal non-conforming use, by expanding their use permit, they are violating their own ordinance. Okay. Finally, a very important item coming before council tonight is their decision regarding the cable casting equipment for council chamber. Currently, we are using one portable camera with a volunteer. Tonight, council will be requested to approve an appropriation for a new sound system for the chamber, and they will be presented with a list of alternatives so far as the camera equipment goes. Everything ranging from one portable camera with one person to the use of 3 cameras with a complete control studio. It will be very interesting to see what council does with that one. I want to thank all of you for watching tonight, and I'd like you to stay tuned for the City Council meeting. See you in a couple of weeks. Bye.